Now you've really done it. Okay, can everybody see my PowerPoint? Can everybody see it? All right.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So you want to save a species. If you have grandchildren who watch Frozen, this will ring a tune for you. But this is a passion project that has been, for me, almost a decade in the making. It is something that Dr. Jeffrey Glassberg has been determined to pursue. It is one of the things he started hounding me about right after I was hired. And we finally have managed to obtain funding for it. So we have launched the Manfreda Conservation Survey, and this is what I'll be sharing with your club tonight. I need to advance that slide. Meet Manfreda maculosa. This is a plant some of you may be familiar with, but I understand most are not. It is associated with aloe and agave. It is a lovely little succulent. It has, depending on the weather, it can be nice and perky like this, or it can be kind of flat and sprawling with almost starfish-like tentacles is how many people will describe it when they're out in the brush looking for it, that it likes to sort of creep out from under other plants. And the best way to find it, if it's not out in the sunshine or with a giant stalk, is to look for those creeping tentacles. It does put out a beautiful flower. Now, the plant itself gets to be about a foot, maybe 14 inches tall at its largest. And then the flowering stalk that it puts out is a very high stalk with pretty creamy flowers like yucca, but they turn pink. And then as they fade, they turn sort of a dark pink, red maroon color as they dry. And that flowering stalk can be about 4 feet tall. And so many people, if they're out again in the wilderness looking for it, if they're lucky enough to hit it in season for flowering, that may be what tips them off and attracts them. The plants need to be about 2 years old to be sexually mature and for them to put out that stalk and that flower. So it's commonly referred to as Texas tuberose, Manfreda maculosa, and its cousin, Manfreda longiflora, put out a very sweet smelling flower. Unlike the other two cousins, the variegata and the sileri, which put out a flower that smells like cooked onions. So Texas tuberose and the longiflora, sweet. This is also, it has many common nicknames, but it's also referred to as liver spot aloe. And looking at this picture, you can kind of tell why. As part of this project, this citizen science endeavor, we are gathering assets. Not a whole lot of research has been done on Manfredas. And the last survey, the last known survey for this rare plant that has a very small habitat range in South Texas was done in 1995 by Bill Carr. So over 25 years ago, and he only surveyed National Wildlife Refuge lands in South Texas. So we are attempting to do much, much more than that 25 years later. And one of the assets that has been lovingly handed to us is a field guide to finding Manfreda by Camille Rich. Her signature is on the bottom of this photo. She inherited land in the Tamaulipan thorn scrub, where the soil is predominantly sand sheet in Puerto Rico, Texas, down here in the lower Rio Grande Valley. She has been individually getting to know the Manfreda on her property for about 20 years and has put together this common guide, field guide for non-scientists. This is one of the things that she put together. She's a retired teacher. And I think you can tell by this, and we can make that field guide available to all of you, but it's really fantastic. You can see here how the aloe and the Manfreda leaves compare in size and shape. They can have a similar texture depending on how much rainfall we've had, or not so similar. Aloe vera can be very plump and juicy, or it can be a little thinner, weaker, more flaccid. Same with the Manfreda. They both have little prickly or thorny spines on the side. And depending on the Manfreda species, those teeth or spines may be closer together, further apart, longer or shorter. But they very much resemble aloe or agave in this respect. So why does the North American Butterfly Association and the National Butterfly Center care so much about Manfreda plants? Well, the Longiflora and the maculosa are the only known host plants for the Manfreda Giant-Skipper. I wish I had lovely photographs of living butterflies for you, but the only person we know who's gone out with a camera, and alas, a net as well, and managed to interact with the butterfly did so in the 1980s before digital photography. And that person is no longer among the living, is my understanding. So what we have are preserved specimens. And this one, along with the larva and the pupa that I'm going to show you, are part of the Texas A&M University insect collection at College Station. They are part of the Roy O. and Connie A. Kendall collection of Lepidoptera. As part of this survey, we are hoping that as people go out looking for the plant, whether on private property or public lands, on their own or at survey sites that we assign to them from historical or anecdotal data, that somebody may happen upon a Manfreda Giant-Skipper. We certainly hope that they will find the plants and interact with them over the 6 to 8 week survey period and find evidence of butterfly activity on their host plants. So what would butterfly activity look like on a Manfreda? The caterpillars or larvae create tents, webbed tents, like webworms do in trees. And so you might find a webbed tent in a Manfreda. You might find caterpillar frass. Now, depending on where you find the Manfreda and the soil type and the amount of leaf litter or debris around it, it may be easy to find frass. It might not be easy. If it's in the sand sheet or red clay or caliche, then you may find frass, which, are going to be very dark brown or black little pellets. You may not. But there's the larva, there's the pupa. And again, these are preserved specimens from Texas A&M University. They were willing to send us photos of these for use in our citizen science training. Why we need to mobilize to go look for this plant. This succulent is being squeezed out of the Texas landscape. It is very rapidly disappearing. And where we are, the primary culprit is javelina. They love this tasty little morsel. Like many succulents, it's an excellent source of water for them. It's also a really great source of fiber in their diet. So one of the hints for looking for Manfreda in the field is looking for javelina tracks and scat in areas where they root around. So there's predation as a problem. There's also development. One of our members, Trip Davenport, who lives in Uvalde County, already told us he knew of a large population of Manfreda that was bulldozed for a new rock quarry. So development, industry are eliminating Manfreda from the landscape. And then we have collection. Since about the year 2000, the World Wildlife Fund and others have been documenting poaching, especially of rare plants, of cactus and succulents and others, for collectors. So these plants are being taken from the wild for people to keep in their private gardens, for them to cultivate, propagate, sell, and that's a problem when we need these plants on, in the wild, on the landscape, to support this butterfly and to fulfill their role in healthy ecosystems. We may also have an issue with hybridization. We're not really concerned about studying that right now, but Texas Parks and Wildlife is, and Anna Strong, their rare plant specialist, has hinted at this. So even though the grant funding we have is for maculosa and longiflora, we're asking people to photograph and stay with and document the full 6 to 8 week cycle with any Manfreda that they find. And then, this may become the basis for a bigger project with TPWD or with US Fish and Wildlife for DNA studies, for other things, and potentially even a large-scale restoration project, which is one of those things that Glassberg would really love to do. We also have the issue of drought. So Manfreda in drought can sort of dry up and retreat back into its hole. And then when it rains, it can come back out. And if y'all could see my hands, I talk with my hands, you can see me retreating and then sprouting, as Manfreda are wont to do, to survive really long dry spells, and then come out and grow and flower and create seed that they can distribute around them for their babies when we have rain. Because the plant is disappearing, the Manfreda is disappearing too. And the butterfly is currently a G1 globally critically imperiled butterfly species. So what have we done? We have put out the call to all citizen scientists. We hope that many will answer the call. The plant historically has been found in about 21 counties, and that went out in y'all's email, I believe, for this meeting. And Bexar County used to be about the northernmost range. I think that Travis County is now what we expect to find, really, as about the northernmost range for this plant. There are few, if any, records for it in Travis County. So we do need people up there to go out looking for it. This is a passion project. Again, We were able to obtain funding for it from the James A. Buddy Davidson Charitable Foundation out of the Midland, Odessa area, associated with Texas Tech University. And that's why we're spearheading this. I am sure that if U.S. Fish and Wildlife or Texas Parks and Wildlife had been able, through committee and their other processes, to prioritize Manfreda and obtain funding for it, that they may be, way ahead of the curve, but they haven't been able to do that. Fortunately, they are supporting us in this way, both agencies, and they have made this project one that qualifies for Texas Master Naturalist hours. So if you are a Texas Master Naturalist and you need hours, you might consider this a project for those hours ahead of your deadline. And I believe they may even be extending deadlines because we are still in this age of COVID. What are we asking citizen scientists to do? We are asking you to attempt to locate and document the plant for a 6 to 8 week period. If you live in an area where we have survey sites or data points close by, we will assign those to you. We have conducted 2 trainings for all program participants. We did those on Saturday and on Monday, right ahead of this. The Monday one was recorded. So if you sign up this week to participate, you can watch that recorded training at your leisure, and we'll email out all of the information to you. All of your forms, the fish and wildlife stuff that Chris Best has put together, Camille Rich's field guide, and everything else. We want you to photograph, measure, count, mark with GPS. The technical name for the type of survey we're doing is meandering, so you don't even have to have any fancy equipment. We want you to go out and wander in the brushlands. We want you to take your safety gear, wear an orange vest if you need to, take survey tape and breadcrumb, wear your snake boots, because it's always snake season in South Texas. We want you to have a walking stick, a snake pole, or an umbrella, whatever you need, so you can safely poke around the plant before you get down, squat close to it, to become intimately familiar with it and take these photos and measurements. We want you to photograph the area. We want you to note landmarks so that this research, if necessary, can be handed off to someone else. And we can send them out into the wilderness to relocate these plants, or find if those populations have disappeared and sprouted up elsewhere, been, destroyed by development, or whatever we find. There has been so little research on these plants that we do expect this survey, this project, to become foundational, hopefully for a lot more good work. And no science project, at least, would be complete without lots of forms. So there are data collection forms, there are observation forms, mileage and time tracking forms, and all of that. So I make it sound onerous here, but really we're asking people for 1 to 2 hours once a week for 6 to 8 weeks. And we say 6 to 8 weeks because we only need you to stay with the plant until it goes to seed. And not all of them will. Some may not even put out stalks. And we're starting with the field work on April 1st. We want, ready, set, go for everyone to be able to roll out about the same time, so that we're all performing this work at about the same time and season. As I mentioned, we've hosted 2 trainings, and we've got these great how-to field guides. Camille's helpful hints and helps include lots of photos and even video where she's gone out onto her property, and she gives you a bigger view, like photo 1, where a novice would never be able to spot the Manfreda. This is Where's Waldo for wilderness people. And then get closer and closer in, sort of training your eye for these little shoots or these little starfish fingerlings. And so we really are going to do our best to equip everyone to go out and have as much success as possible with this plant that will play hide and seek with you. Another one of the things we've developed is our Habitat Homies list. These are the plants that Manfreda's likely to hang out with and be located near, under, or around. And we didn't put the scientific names in the presentation. We can, here, but we can provide those to you. We're using the common names. And if you're familiar with the Tamaulipan thorn scrub, you know many of these plants. Coyotillo, guajillo, prickly pear, guayacan, which is the host plant for the lyside sulfur, colima, Mexican olive, black brush. Some that are not listed here are the saladillo, guapilla, the dog cholla, Fitz's hedgehog cactus, and tasajillo, which is the Christmas cactus. Horse crippler, some of these other plants that you're familiar with if you live in South Texas are Manfreda's friends. Manfreda likes saline soil, so it likes the sandy loam, the caliche, and even the clay soils where there is good drainage. So it's found on the monte where we have hills. It's found frequently on the railroad easements because they mound the railroad up a bit. Unfortunately, we find that many of the railroad companies now are doing their best to eliminate vegetation in their easements and on those mounds. But even there where they have the drainage ditches, the little swells on the side, the Manfreda can move and be growing up the other sides of those where habitat has not been, where all the vegetation has not been eliminated, because that's good habitat. Manfreda tolerates sun and shade. So we're wanting people to survey public lands, private lands, rights of way, everywhere that Manfreda might be hanging out, and looking for those stalks as you drive around, walk around will be helpful, especially if you're a butterflyer or birder and you're getting out this spring. If you stumble upon some, we ask that you please take pictures of it and let us know. Drop a GPS pin if you know how to do that. If not, take very detailed notes about directions, landmarks, and all of that so we can go out and find it again. The last part of this project is seed collection. We cannot do that on public lands. We cannot do that on private property without permission. but we do seek to do that according to CPC guidelines, where we would be taking no more than 10% of seed from the plants in any given population. And we are creating 6 research beds at the National Butterfly Center. These will have different soil compositions, different mounds. They'll be receiving various amounts of water. And Stephanie, who runs our nursery, and Max, who is our director of operations and our plant guy, not me. I have a brown thumb. They don't let me near anything living. But Stephanie and Max will be in charge of this, with guidance and input from Chris Best and Camille Rich, who has 20 years experience propagating Manfreda on her property, so that we can learn as much as possible before undertaking any large-scale restoration project. And the National Butterfly Center and NABA have some experience with these things. We are in the second 5-year cycle of Tamaulipan kidney petal, or Ienia limitaris, partner project with Fish and Wildlife for this federally listed endangered plant, where we are the propagator and we have become a refugia, and we are also distributing the plants that we propagate to private property owners and Fish and Wildlife and TPWD for their pockets of these plants being restored throughout South Texas. And we've done some work with slender rush pea that is planted around the building at the National Butterfly Center, another federally listed endangered plant in a project done with Fish and Wildlife. We also have Walker's manioc. And recently, Texas Parks and, not Texas Parks and Wildlife, Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT, sent a bunch of their contractors to the National Butterfly Center so they could get to know those plants up close and personal as they went surveying for them ahead of more right-of-way destruction. So these projects have very broad conservation implications. And we care about the plant, but mostly because we want to save the butterfly. It is one of the 450 some listed as butterflies of Texas, even though it has practically disappeared from the landscape. This project aligns with our mission. And those of you who know Dr. Glassberg can only imagine how much of my job is spent corralling his passion and enthusiasm for all things butterfly into things we can reasonably do that align with and support the mission of the National Butterfly Center, which is growing connections. We're growing connections between people, plants, and pollinators. And this is a way for people to have an education and a hands-on experience in a project that we think will grow connections for generations and help save one of Texas's natural treasures. So that is the end of my presentation. And I'm ready to take questions.
Marianna, thank you very much, Marianna. That was very inspiring. What about how do you get access to? There's so much private land in South Texas. The King Ranch. I mean, I guess they might cooperate, but how do you get on private land?
Well, you know, we've been trying to publicize the project to our members and the public, and reaching out to the private property owners we know, and I hate to say using them, but, you know, asking them to reach out to their neighbors for participation or cooperation. Now that obviously, as you said, presents many challenges, because the minute people hear private property owners, especially hear rare, endangered, something like that, they're like, nope, I don't want the feds on my property. So we're not the federal government. The rules for plants, rare and endangered plants, are nowhere near the same as they are for endangered wildlife species. And the idea that this butterfly could become listed as endangered, I hate to say is sort of pie in the sky, but it really is. I mean, it's practically impossible to get a butterfly species listed as endangered. So we're having a lot of uphill battles. We have very few private property participants. Texas Parks and Wildlife has lots of private property partners, but they are at this point not willing to stick their neck out for us in this until they see how this goes.
Wow.
So even though they have hired us to do things like the Frosted Elfin Survey in East Texas, they don't want to throw their full weight and resources behind this project at this point. They want to see how it goes, and then maybe they'll have their own project, I guess, where they're in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe open some of those doors and properties, you know, and put their name, reputation,
Sure.
and trust on the line. So when we say this is foundational, we mean it in every sense of the word, not only for Texas Parks and Wildlife, but also for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And Jeff has been pushing them for as long as I've been at the Butterfly Center, which will be in 10 years in July, for Manfreda to become a priority plant species, a listed endangered plant for both the federal government and the state. And in the state, that's going to be really hard too. I don't know who all's on this call, but in Texas, you know, oil and gas calls all the shots. And most of Texas's conservation coordination is done through the Texas Comptroller's Office and through entities like Laura Bush's Texan by Nature. And everybody thinks, oh, how wonderful, you know, Laura Bush has this fantastic conservation organization, which, yes, it can be, but it's also intended to bring all of the conservation and environmental people into the fold so they know what our priorities are, so they can get ahead of them. Specifically, so oil and gas and the Comptroller's Office can get ahead of them and safeguard their interests. You know,
yeah,
there's no diplomatic way to state all of that.
yeah. I was going to look and see if any questions. Somebody asked a question. We have documented a number of Manfreda plants via iNaturalist. Is this data useful?
And we are using all of that data. Again, the ones in places as far north as Dallas, we suspect are cultivars. And I mentioned that's happening, you know. So we're really trying to stick to Travis County, to the coast, and to the river and south, those 21 counties with more historical records, and also with the appropriate native habitat for this plant species, which Dallas really doesn't have, you know, that area. So we expect we'll encounter cultivars. We've had people sign up for the project who say, I have a wonderful, thriving little population in my backyard.
Mhm.
Well, where did those plants come from? You know, they'll say, oh, a native plant person shared seeds with me, or this or that. So these are, again, not necessarily wild specimens, but at this point, we're going to study it all,
Mhm.
except the Dallas stuff.
Anybody else can ask questions, just unmute yourself and ask away.
I have a question, please. I was wondering if you could go back to the picture, Marianna, the picture of the blooms. And I don't know if I'm out of compliance, but I'm taking pictures with my phone.
That's
So
fine.
pictures of your picture so I can have it in case when I'm walking around, it'll be there in my phone.
That is fine. And I can send Mike and Dan all of the assets that we've created or that our partners have created for this. So let me go back to screen share.
There was a
And-
really good picture you had with, it was further back and it showed the beautiful petals.
Yeah. So
blooms.
this one I want to show you because it is the Manfreda longiflora bloom. And you see how the petals of this curve back,
Uh-huh.
and the anthers or the stamens do not extend beyond the petals. They don't really protrude from there. And let me go back and I'll show you the other blooms in the first
That
slide
one,
and this
right.
one. These are the maculosa blooms. And you'll see that the anthers really do extend beyond the petals.
Well, that's
So-
what caught my eye, and I could barely, I thought it was a mistake or something down there on that white one on the bottom where they sort of go in a circle.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm going to go back to the beginning photo, which has them where they're already starting to fade. And you see that they go from that cream to the pink
Mhm.
and then to this dark pink, red, almost maroon when they're dried up. Now, the variegata and the sileri have different flowers also. And those flowers, the variegata is a green, like an acid green, sort of like my slide frame, to brown flower.
hmm.
And it's much featherier, if that's even a word, than these. And the sileri has a green to yellow flower.
I see that one is on against a fence. Is that its habit? Does it like to climb a little bit?
It really does not like to climb, but they're going to choose to grow where they grow. And we haven't determined that they're technically tuberous. And Mike, you jump in if I'm wrong there. I am not a scientist. I'm not a plant person or a biologist or anything by trade. I was hired for my business acumen, not any sort of scientific acumen. But they seem to be able to creep and grow. So it's more than just where the seed may deposit. For me, it seems almost more like the way our prairie milkweed does, our Oenotherites. You plant it and it has a tap root, and that plant, you know, disappears in the winter, and it might come back there, but it also might come back 3 feet away for some reason.
So
Go ahead.
I have a question about the participants and how the county assignment will be done and when that will be done.
we still have people signing up right now. Even James was in our training earlier. During that training, we had people signing up. So we hope to get everybody's assignments out to them this week. And we are going to assign a survey site or data points to each person that are closest to that person. And if it's not close enough, you can opt out. But that is our goal. So if we have a data point, obviously you're going to get that. If we have a nature center or a cemetery or something like that, a National Wildlife Refuge tract, or, you know, or state park that's closest to you, you will be assigned that.
Okay. I live in Travis County, but I have a friend that has property in Edwards County, which is not part of this survey, but it's one county north of Kennedy County. And so potentially, you know, I could maybe go out there a couple times as well.
That would be awesome. And, you know, historical records are limited by all kinds of issues. And as Dan or Mike, I don't remember which of you mentioned, like the King Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
If no custodians or property owners of those enormous tracts are looking for or sharing knowledge of having this plant, then there are not going to be any historical records. And there we're talking about, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres. So your friend who is near there in that county, you know, there may be Manfreda in that area. Certainly it's in Aransas County and in Kennedy and some surroundings. So we're telling people that avoid counts too. If you go to appropriate habitat and you do not find any evidence of the plant, we'll take that data too. And those survey hours should count. And, you know, you are eligible for the fuel stipend and all of that, because an absence of Manfreda could be just as meaningful as the presence of it. So yeah, people are able to say,
Mm-hmm.
I want to survey this area, and we'll go along with that too.
Okay, thank you.
Marianna, do you, go ahead. I've asked her to ask a question. Go ahead.
Should we just jump in with questions here, or are we supposed?
Yes,
Okay.
Go ahead.
I could share an observation related to that question about the fence. Do they grow on fences?
Oh, okay.
Great.
I've been working with Manfredas for a while. I'm working with Cesar Kleberg Wildlife Center, and we have a collection of native plants, but it includes all five of the Manfredas in the United States, because all five of the Manfredas in the United States happen to be found in Texas. So that's pretty neat. I would say that probably 90% of the Manfreda mostly maculosa that I've seen probably are within a foot of a fence like that. And I think the main reason is because the wildlife can't get them on the one side so easily, and the mowers don't get them on the other side, and that 1 foot right near the fence is their most protected habitat. And it also makes it easier when the plants has these flower stalks that are 2 or 3 feet up in the air. You're driving along country roads, that's the best way to find them, is to be looking near the fence, especially if there's a few bushes where the mowers can't get quite all the way there, but the deer don't like to be on that side of the fence, and that's prime habitat for finding them. And a lot of locating these plants can be done driving down back roads, really.
Thank you, David. And that is a valid point, especially where people are mowing either the right of way or their own property, or, you know, south of Falfurrias, we have Border Patrol, you know, creating their enforcement zones on either side of fences and different things like that. So rather than that being a natural occurrence, we do believe this is an adaptive issue, that the plants have managed to find a safe space. Sort of safe, I guess, because javelina are, it's hard to hide from them.
That's good.
I
You
don't
wanna,
know.
you wanna,
I don't know.
stop your share screen?
Oh, sure.
so you
Sorry
see
about
people?
that.
Go ahead, Ann. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to enter into this. We have
You're doing
property in Edwards County, and I was interested in how north in the Uvalde County, and we're very close to that border, the plants have been seen.
Well, they have been seen in Uvalde County.
How
So
far north? The question is how far, we're on the north edge.
I am not sure how far north. Trip Davenport has been providing information to us, but I have not received, you know, GPS coordinates or real detailed information from him. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, Bill Dimple is being quiet, and I don't know why, because he is big into this. And he has looked for it on our property. I was trying to see, we have some of the habitat plants that are associated, but not, we would really be on the very north. It would be hard for me to imagine that we actually have them.
And
But we would be interested, we would be happy for anybody to look.
Well, that is great. And it does seem to be creeping north. And we can't say that with, you know, scientific accuracy at this point, but it does appear as though the plant is slowly creeping further and further north.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
think the kind of known distribution is a line due west of Bear County. There's a series of counties that are in line there, and the various, I mean, I'm looking at the one of the plant mapping sites, and it's all the counties from Bear County and the three counties in a line due west to the Rio. So that's Edwards is a little bit above that, as I recollect.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Bye.
What? Oh,
But that doesn't mean anything at this point,
Right.
Mike.
And I mean, I've got it in my yard here in Austin, so it can proliferate north of the natural distribution. I'm not sure we'll get the butterfly up that way anytime soon necessarily, but the plant can be grown north of its natural range.
And I think climate change is pushing it north. I think drought in South Texas is pushing it north. There are going to be a lot of factors at play, but it does appear to be increasing its natural range, or we're just now finding more of it because people are becoming more aware.
mhm.
Hey, can you hear me, Ann?
Mhm.
Yes.
Hey,
Bill?
Dan, I had to dial in with my phone after my name was spoken. This
Okay.
Bill Demple. My computer doesn't have a microphone that works, so I had to dial in with my phone. And I did look for the Manfreda on your property when I was out there. I wasn't able to find it, but that's what I was emailing you about the other day, saying sometime maybe we should go out. Maybe I could get out to your property and do a survey and see if I can find the host plant out there.
That would be fantastic, especially as we enter the season where they should be putting out stalk and flower. It sure is easier to find a 4-foot stalk than it is a creeping little fingerling under a coyote plant.
I have never seen it, the flower in bloom. What time of year does the plant bloom?
Okay, so I'm going to give you the textbook, not the reality. The textbook for the maculosa is that its flowering season is spring to early fall. So that's a huge range, but that's why we're starting April 1st and asking people to go about 6 to 8 weeks. So, and it could be that you wind up, if you find plants and they put out a stalk and you're waiting for flower, you're waiting for seed, that you wind up sitting with it longer than that, because it used to be a May, June thing, but it doesn't seem to be that anymore. And then the longiflora used to be a September, October flower. But people who have them in the Rio Grande Valley, in their yards and pots, you know, in various places, are saying that their longiflora is flowering late spring to early summer. And they're also saying they may even get summer flowering. So this may be a function of rain, of hurricane season, of tropical storms, of those sorts of things, because plants, you know, can be great survivalists and opportunistic. So I've given you the textbook, and then the reality is that, you know, from like Camille Rich right now has plants that have put up stalk. She's waiting for flower. And we're at the end of March, what, 3 weeks after Storm Uri? So, you know, did that cold snap trigger a, holy cow, I better flower and make seed because my life is threatened? We don't know. But that's what's happening. So I don't know that there's any real textbook anymore. And we see that with other plants at the National Butterfly Center. Crucita, which is fall mist flower, used to flower in the fall. Now we have it flowering in April and May, depending on the weather. The Ienia limitaris is supposed to flower and go to seed in late spring, I believe. And it may or may not, depending on the cold and the rainfall. And then it all started to flower and put out seed this year. And we were all waiting for it to ripen so we could collect it. And Hurricane Hannah hit and everything was lost. We wound up with no seed. So we just gotta be observant. That's the best I got.
I can tell you that some plants that we've grown from South Texas seed, well, actually, Karnes County seed, they actually propagate very easily compared to most plants that have been in the ground for a few years in the middle of Austin, have just started to send up stalks this week. Generally in the wild, most of the times when they flower is spring into early summer on the maculosa. That's the most likely time that you're going to see them, and that's the best time to find them also. But the seeds will stay on the pods for a while. sometimes the pods will ripen and then they'll start to split, and some of those seeds will fall. But if you pay attention and you really turn those pods upside down, there's still some seed in there, and one flower stalk can produce a couple thousand seeds. So they can be very prolific if you know the other predator, I think, was one of the main predators would be the white-tailed deer. They do more damage to them than the javelinas maybe, and certainly any of the exotic deer. And I think cows will do a big number on them too, for that matter. But if the deer don't get them and they get decent weather, they really can produce a lot of seed.
Yeah, the cows definitely trample them and do a number on them as well.
Well, they're very tasty. The ones that we have,
Really?
From the ones that we have at Cesar Kleberg. So we've set up a botanical garden only using South Texas native plants there. And we have probably about 150 to close to 200 now of the woody succulent species of South Texas out of the about 350 that we have on our list. And when the javelina and the deer get in there, we have all sorts of apparently delicious plants. The first thing they go to is the Manfredas before they eat all sorts of other things. Really, they've got to be like the best dessert for those animals, because it's the first thing they go to.
Yeah, so all of ours and our research beds are going to be caged, because that is the only way that we can protect them from predation.
Before we get
How durable are the flower stalks? The only 2 times I found Manfreda in the wild, I didn't even see signs of an old dead stalk or anything. And I'm just wondering if they weren't flowering or if something had eaten them or what.
I will defer to David on that. What have you seen?
The flower stalks will last months, but not by the winter. They've pretty much fallen, in my experience.
But they've fallen. But so I should have found them sort of on the ground next to the flower or the plant, which I didn't. So I'm wondering if the plants just hadn't flowered or what.
Could be, or if the stalks are more edible than the flat plant. So if there's some kind of grazing, they might have eaten the stalk and not gotten the plant. My biggest problem is very often the mowers from the county road department and the highway department eat the stalks, but that's a different story.
Yeah, so they fall and then they get turned into mulch or whatever.
So Marianna, so if we want to participate in this project, what do we do? Right.
So if you want to participate, I need you to send me an email, and I'm going to put my email here in the chat, and also you guys can send it out to everybody. That's totally fine. It's Marianna with 2 N's, like the Mariana Islands, at National Butterfly Center.org. Marianna at nationalbutterflycenter.org. And then I will email you a link to an online form that you fill out, and that only takes 1 to 2 minutes. We need to keep that for the funder. We also need to keep that so we can communicate with you. And then I'll email you the link to the recorded training, and I'll email you all of the forms and documents, and we'll continue to communicate about where and what you're surveying and whether seed collection is even an option. And then we'll go more in depth into seed collection if that becomes an issue. That is something that we completely left out of the project training. And that's partly because Texas Parks and Wildlife was really like, like, you're not going to come onto our lands and collect our seed and take our, and we're like, nope, and we won't even address it with people. So It'll only be for those who are collecting on their own property, on property where the landowner has given us permission, or in public rights of way.
Mhm. We don't have to stop the question just now. I just want to say that Alan Winter posted our PayPal link to join our club membership, which I didn't have earlier in the meeting, but so go to the chat and you can find the PayPal link if you want to join the club.
Hey, Dan.
Go.
Dan,
Yes,
can,
Alan.
can I add something? If you have PayPal, this link will take you directly to your PayPal. But if you don't have PayPal, it'll take you to whatever you do have, or it'll give you an interface to use your own credit card, bank card, whatever. So it's a universal link. You can use anything you want, but it's an easy, safe, secure way to pay club dues electronically and immediately. And I just posted it again. So
Okay, thank you.
thanks, Dan.
Any more questions? There was some mention in the chat that this has been found near Mitchell Lake, this plant. Is that person still on?
Patty, I think she might have
Might have left.
I think she sent her thanks
Okay.
there, but she's active more on the bird side, but flora and fauna in the San Antonio area, and I think she mentioned finding it earlier on and refound it recently. So
Okay.
semi ostensibly stable population. I think she's mostly in, I think she might have even said in the Mitchell Lake area. It's the area I associate her where she's most active.
Hey, Dan, I have a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Marianna, did I just cut you off?
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, we want birders to participate because, you know, you're out there walking and looking around. You might as well look for these flowering stalks.
Absolutely.
I had a quick question. I'm kind of fascinated. First of all, great presentation, and I learned a lot. Thank you. And
Thank
I'm
you.
even thinking about maybe doing some of this myself, although I never leave the studio. But I was fascinated with the idea that the Manfreda is moving, or that the plant is moving north because of climate change, or maybe just because we have more people looking for it and we're finding it where it already was. But do you have a sense that even if we were able to affect some kind of a revival of the plant, that the Manfreda Giant-Skipper itself would bounce back and become common again? Or is your sense that maybe it's too late for that anyway? Or how do these things generally work with rare butterflies?
That's a great question. So there is a recently, and by recently, I mean, you know, like the last 5 years, a recent documentation on private property of Manfreda Giant-Skipper in South Texas, of eggs, of tents. And so the butterfly has not vanished. It is not extinct. What we don't know is what is required to support the butterfly. Is it 1 or 2 plants? Is it 100 plants? And that's what we really, I think, are aiming toward. Jeff Glassberg is under the impression that the butterfly is going to require significant plant density to rebound. I don't know why he thinks that. But we do know that, you know, insects, we can take the monarch, for example, have, they're incredibly resilient. You know, they lay hundreds or thousands of eggs, and maybe 10% survive to adulthood. So because there hasn't been any real study done of Manfreda Giant-Skipper or this host plant, do we assume the same thing? I think we kind of have to start there, that a Manfreda Giant-Skipper adult may lay 100 eggs. And if 10% make it, we've got 10 Manfreda Giant-Skipper from that one butterfly. The caterpillars consume the stalk and the root. They don't eat the leaves, which is why you're looking for tents and frass. So just in that alone, the caterpillar are relatively more protected than a lot of butterfly larvae are. I don't know how this, how you figure all this out without studying them, without hopefully finding evidence of Manfreda Giant-Skipper activity, and then maybe putting up real tents to see what's going on there. But those are some of the things that I know we're aiming toward, and also toward propagating a significant number of plants, 100, 200, 300, that we can put in a suitable terrain so that they survive. And I know Jeff wants to fence them also. He would never hurt a fly, but you talk about this and he's ready to go hunting javelina, and give them a good chance. And we were supposed to close on our latest property acquisition during Uri, and we did not. The title company was out without electricity. We were without electricity and all of that for about a week. So everything's been pushed back. We hope to close this week or next week. And we're acquiring 350 acres, 6 miles west of the National Butterfly Center, that has more of that saline soil. It is near Hoja de Agua Road. Hoja de Agua means spring. So it is our South Texas water that's salty to begin with, very near the surface. And this property had a hill. It had its own monte with a historical population of Manfreda. In the last 2 years of surveying this property, we found no evidence of Manfreda. But at this point, Jeff wants to fence the entire hill and reestablish hundreds of Manfreda plants there. And we do believe that we will be able to seed Manfreda butterflies or eggs or caterpillars there in the future, should we be able to accomplish all of the steps leading up to this.
Excellent, thank you. And
You're welcome.
you might have covered this already. There was just a short piece of your presentation that I missed. But we have in our Facebook group, we have tons of people who love growing plants and milkweeds and stuff for butterflies. Is this the kind of thing, and can they even get them anywhere where they would be helpful, like growing it in their gardens or in their property, etc.?
So, and I'm going to go off Chris Best's information for this. At this point, we're not really interested in cultivars, but if we're able to collect seed from viable wild plants, populations, and germinate them, we want to do that in their native soil. So that would rule out, I think, probably some of Travis County. Now, if we find populations like at Mitchell Lake and other places, then that may open a whole nother opportunity where people could actually grow the seed, propagate them in soil that they are already doing really well in. But apparently the native soil does a lot for the DNA of the plant. And that's why we want to steer clear of any cultivars at this point.
Okay, so we don't kind of want to pollute the gene pool.
Correct. That's exactly right.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
But Alan, to your question, I don't think the giant skipper is going to be abundant ever, and part of the reason why it's historically fairly widespread, but so little known is they have a short flight period. So, but most of the giant skippers have I don't maybe 6 weeks is even too much, but a spring flight period, and the Manfreda Giant-Skipper is one that also has a fall, certainly historically a fall flight period as well. So that, like the falcate orange tips that are on the wing right now, some of these early spring butterflies and a few diurnal moths that just have just a short window where they're found, so it makes studying them, learning about them problematic, and it increases the apparent rareness of the species. So a lot of factors in there, but it's likely not to be likely not to be common anytime soon.
All right, great. Thanks, Mike.
Sure. I mean, when it was first found in the 50s, it was fairly common, but those days are gone.
Marianna, I like you described, you used the words at one time, a passion project. Is that your little description of it, or is that a certain term of usage, or?
Yeah, passion project is a term of use. And if you know Jeff, you know that he's passionate about butterflies.
Yeah. Okay, passion product.
He's kind of like a little top that you pull that string and he just goes. Brrr. So you mentioned Manfreda Giant-Skipper. He'll just go off on you. Same as with Power Chic skippers and a couple of, and the Miami Blue, and these things that really he wants NABA to pursue with vigor.
Well, Marianna, I really have enjoyed listening to you. You're a fantastic communicator.
Oh, well, thank
you. I'm listening to what you're saying and you're passionate about it, but I'm also kind of thinking the way you talk about things is a good lesson for eggheads and stuff to pay attention to how to communicate,
Well, thank you. I think I lack the eggheadness, so I can't communicate that way.
I've learned a lot from watching how you do it.
Well, thank you. And I'm so grateful that y'all were willing to learn about this. And James has now had Manfreda Giant-Skipper for hours tonight. And I hope some of you will sign up, even if it's to share that you went looking and you didn't find anything. Our funder certainly is going to be interested in all of that. And they like us. And this is the kind of thing their board of directors has said would be really cool for them to have their name associated with, saving this plant, having a resurgence perhaps of this butterfly. And Texas Tech University does a lot of agricultural and a lot of biological and DNA and other type research. So we were lucky to find them and to have them decide that what we're doing is worthwhile. And I mentioned at the beginning of the call, but a lot of people weren't on here. this House Bill 520. Make sure I've got that right. If this is appropriate to share, Dan and Mike, may
Sure.
I?
Go for it again.
Definitely.
Okay, so I'm in Austin tonight, actually, because I was asked to come and testify before the House Transportation Committee tomorrow. House Bill 520 is in committee right now. We don't know if it'll make it out of committee. They'll vote presumably on that tomorrow. Of course, then it's got to make it through some other hurdles. But this House bill would mandate that public utility companies restore rights of way where they put in pipeline or Ethernet or whatever it is they're putting in with native grasses and wildflowers. It seems like a no-brainer. TxDOT already has a huge native grasses and wildflowers project. We have Keep Texas Beautiful. It promotes tourism. It helps provide breeding and feeding areas for butterflies and bees and other wildlife. And specifically at this time, I mean, I want to promote the butterflies, but I've been told that I need to speak to the revenue producing pollinators, which are our native bees and the Texas Western honeybee, which is the state bee of Texas. And so even if you can't, for whatever reason, chime in tomorrow at the Capitol, be a part of this hearing and come make public comments, please reach out to your state legislator and your state senator about House Bill 520 and how important it is that we take care of the land that is taking care of all of us. And we know that our public utilities need to continue to expand, improve, enhance, because they keep us alive. But the pollinators are keeping everything alive too. And this can be done hand in hand. And I know the utility companies are going to try to fight back on cost, but TxDOT has already proven that their program has reduced their overhead expenses because they no longer have to mow on that every 2 to 3 month schedule. They let everything grow, flower, go to seed, and then they come in and mow. And those wildflowers and grasses reseed the next crop. So there really is very little that is as sustainable as what House Bill 520 is trying to enact. So please become an advocate for it however you can.
Is there a corresponding Senate bill, or how does it?
I have not been provided that information. If I get it, I'll share it with you guys tomorrow.
Okay, great.
And that's a live meeting or a Zoom meeting you're going to?
It is live.
Okay.
Are you kidding? Governor Abbott has removed the mask mandate and we're all open for business. So the legislature
100%, I hear.
I will be masked, probably double masked, even though I have been vaccinated at the Capitol tomorrow in person.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody letting us know where you're coming from and letting us know how you heard about it. We appreciate the feedback that you've given us.
It was a pleasure to meet you all and see some familiar faces.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Good
Bye.
night. Good night, Marianna.
Good night.
Thank you, Marianna.
Thank you.
Take care.